So, back in the ground on statue. I'm going to do my best to ignore that as I read here. Florida has been a busy, busy state in the past week or so. On March 1st, Florida's legislature, a Republican in Florida's legislature, has filed a bill that, if enacted, would eliminate the Florida Democratic Party. This music is not very fitting, but we'll go with it. The Ultimate Cancel Act, filed on Tuesday by Senator Blaise Ingoglia. So Tuesday was, if I remember right, Tuesday was the 28th, so the last day of February, would require the state's Division of Elections to immediately cancel the filings of any political party whose platform had previously advocated for or been in support of slavery or involuntary servitude. The bill, called SB 1248, would require Florida officials to notify all registered voters who belong to any canceled parties that their parties no longer exist. It would also change their voter registrations to no party affiliation and, quote, provide procedures for those voters to update their affiliations to, quote, an active political party. So, if you're not necessarily familiar with the Republican suite of talking points, they are alluding to the Democratic Party having had a past of being a party full of racists in the 19th century. This was, of course, before the party switch. And they are obviously ignoring the fact that the Republican Party has been the party of the KKK throughout most of the 20th century, including in one Louisiana election where the Grand Wizard of the KKK, David Duke, ran on the Republican ticket and was only narrowly defeated by his Democratic opponent. So really, this is just a pretense that Republicans are engaging in to ban their political opposition and to forcibly register voters in the state of Florida with the Democratic Party. I talked about this a little bit last stream, but this time it's not its own thing, because as I get to the next couple of bills, it'll become evident very quickly. This was not a one-off event. Here we have March 3rd, 2 days afterwards. Florida bill targets gender-affirming healthcare for trans youth and adults. Transgender youths and adults may soon find their access to gender-affirming medical care heavily restricted and their identities erased from official documents under sweeping legislation introduced Friday in the Florida House. Under Florida's newly proposed House Bill 1421, gender-affirming healthcare, including puberty blockers, hormone therapy, and surgeries, will be outlawed to transgender minors. Transgender adults would be required to clear a number of additional regulatory hurdles to receive care in the state, including submitting a written consent form to their doctors each time they have an appointment. So this is a soft ban. This is a soft ban on all transgender affirming care, but this is a hard ban on gender affirming care for minors. The informed consent form, the reason I call it a soft ban is because there are arbitrary hurdles being introduced for grown-ups who would otherwise be allowed to make decisions about their own life, and the details of how substantial those hurdles are I will get to in just a second. The informed consent form must detail the long-term and short-term effects of gender-affirming medical care, as well as the potential impact such care may have on a person's physical and mental health, according to the bill, which also makes it easier for patients to sue their doctors within a 30-year statute of limitations. So not only do they want it to become harder on the patient's end to receive this kind of care without the state being able to cook up some excuse to say no, they also want it to be more difficult for doctors to administer this care with their patients, you know, and do consultation, whatever it is, without patients potentially suing them. And you know that given the way that the conservative political machine works in this country, there will be a number of paid conservative activists who try to basically go fishing for lawsuits at these doctors' offices, which is going to put a chilling effect on this form of care for many people. Doctors are going to be much less willing to provide care if they are potentially at risk for getting sued over it. And ultimately, I can't blame the doctors for that. Florida healthcare providers, the article continues, or hospital employees under the bill are protected from, quote, any disciplinary or other recriminatory action if they refuse to supply gender-affirming care to a consenting adult on, quote, clinical, moral, or religious grounds. So basically, if you are any kind of clinician, a medic, a doctor, a nurse, you know, anybody like that, hospital worker, you can simply, at any point in the process, somebody can say, no, I'm not going to administer this gender-affirming care to this person. And they would be, under this bill, they would be in their rights to do that. Basically putting transgender care on grounds so precarious that it could never survive any single conservative actor in the entire process. The measure also bars state health insurance policies and health maintenance policies from covering gender-affirming care. And there's another nail in the coffin. They would make it illegal for you to benefit from any sort of insurance helping you along the way. And in the United States, medical care is absurdly expensive. So, no insurance, that basically means that you'd have to be next level wealthy to be able to afford this kind of care with this new bill. Basically, the stars would have to so perfectly align under the passage of this new bill, if it were to pass, for you to get any trans gender-affirming healthcare that you may need on any individual occasion. There are just so many moving parts that the bill enables to decline medical care that at any stage of the process, one person could say no, and that's it. Florida's Agency for Healthcare Administration has already eliminated Medicaid coverage for gender-affirming healthcare for transgender individuals of all ages. The state's medical boards in February voted to adopt a set of rules that bar transgender youth younger than 18 from receiving puberty blockers and hormone replacement therapy. So, one thing to disclose right away. It might seem weird that there's a board of health, presumably health professionals, adopting measures like this. That's because Ron DeSantis has basically filled the government with his cronies, especially the health care administration. If you guys remember, during COVID, they came to blows over that. He has since filled the whole group up with people who are, well, politically subservient to him, we'll say. And additionally, the puberty blockers, the ban on puberty blockers is basically a ban on all gender-affirming care for folks younger than 18, with the exception of people who are of the age of medical consent, but not yet the age of majority, who would go through with a surgery. Regardless, the point here being that puberty blockers are like the mainstay of trans healthcare for people who are underage, because they are only useful before or during puberty happening, because they prevent puberty from happening any further. And in order to reverse their effects, all you have to do is stop taking them. So it's, you know, it's a almost completely non-committal. You know, the point here was never about protecting kids from bad parenting or whatever excuse they cook up. It was always about an ideological opposition to the existence of trans people as an a priori position. It doesn't matter whether any good or bad comes of it. Republicans would be opposed to the existence of a trans person either way. Continuing, the legislation filed Friday also aims to prevent people born in Florida from amending their birth certificate to reflect a sex that is different from their sex assigned at birth, although exceptions exist for individuals whose genitalia was unresolvably ambiguous when they were born, or in the case of Scrivener's error. So basically, you know, for people born intersex in such a way that they have genitals of both sex or something like that. They make exceptions, but in all other cases, you are literally not allowed to be transgender in the legal framework. State Republican representative Randy Fine, who is sponsoring the legislation in the state house, tweeted Friday that this bill will ensure Florida residents are not forced into funding the sexual mutilation of adults and to bring about justice for those tricked into this evil. See, this is exactly what I said. They don't actually care about the well-being of people. It's just them thinking trans people are evil. You'll notice it says sexual mutilation of adults. Guys, all surgery is mutilation. They cut you open and they do things to you. That's how surgery works. By that logic, you know, if you were to use this framing for a surgery that I've had, I went and got my wisdom teeth removed a year or two ago. If I were to phrase it the way a Republican would, I went and got my, you know, had my cranium mutilated for the sake of reducing the size of my jawline or something like that. When in reality what happened was I went in, I did some consultation actually with a dentist. They showed me a diagram of my teeth. It said, hey, you should probably get your wisdom teeth removed. They haven't migrated yet, which is good. You know, it would be very easy to remove them. So, you know, maybe schedule that sooner than later. And we scheduled a meeting at a clinic, a local clinic. I went in. They administered the, what was it? Laughing gas or whatever it was. It was the IV version of the sort of sedative that they give you. They put me under. They did the surgery. My wisdom teeth were gone. And then, you know, I woke up. It was great. Didn't feel a thing. I had to eat, you know, softer foods for a couple of weeks. That was it. It was all according to the direction of myself, with the advice of medical professionals, and it went almost perfectly. And statistically speaking, those kinds of surgeries have higher regret rates than gender-affirming surgeries for trans people. And then here we have posted March 2nd, the day before that other article. Florida bill would require bloggers who write about the governor to register with the state. Any small government Republicans in the audience take an issue with this? No? Nobody? I'll give you a little secret. That's because they don't care. Anyway, I will read here. This is from News Channel 8, local news. Florida Senator Jason Brodeur, Republican from Lake Mary, wants bloggers who write about Governor DeSantis, Attorney General Moody, and other members of the Florida Executive Cabinet or legislature, anybody in the Florida government, to register with the state or face fines. The proposal, Senate Bill 1316, information dissemination, would require any blogger writing about government officials to register with the Florida Office of Legislative Services or the Commission on Ethics, basically compiling a list of all bloggers who write anything political. In the bill, Brodeur wrote that those who write, quote, an article, a story, or series of stories about, quote, the governor, the lieutenant governor, a cabinet officer, or any member of the legislative, and receives or will receive payment for doing so, must register with state offices 5 days after the publication of an article that mentions the elected state official. So basically, if you have a substantial enough platform that you are earning revenue from any news stories that you're writing, you have to register with the state and go on our list of journalists that we will, you know, definitely not use to prosecute you in the future. If another blog post is added to a blog, the blogger would then be required to submit monthly reports on the 10th of each month with the appropriate state office. They would not have to submit a report on months when no content is published. Failure to file these disclosures or register with state officials, if the bill passes, would lead to daily fines for the bloggers, with a maximum amount per report, not per writer, of $2,500. The per day fine is $25 per report for each day that it's late. So if I'm reading this correctly, you could be fined up to $2,500 a day for posting political information without registering with the state. The bill also requires that bloggers file notices of failure to file a timely report the same way that lobbyists file their disclosures and reports on assessed fines, which is hilarious because everything the Republican Party has ever done in relation to lobbyists is to attempt to make it easier for them to not report. Meanwhile, they're oh so concerned with journalistic integrity from these bloggers. And now if I move on, this surprisingly is not the end of it. Florida Republicans propose, quote, fascist bill to remove trans kids from their parents' custody. This story is from March 3rd also. Here we have a thread from Equality Florida. Breaking. A bill has been filed in the Florida Senate to criminalize parents and healthcare providers providing gender-affirming care to trans youth. This is a different bill than the one from earlier. This is SB 254. It would allow the government to seize control of kids if their parents might seek the care that is supported by all major medical orgs. Of course, Republicans very conveniently leave the part out that the gender-affirming care that does exist that, trans youth are seeking out is widely approved of by all the medical institutions that we have, by all the available data that has been gathered on the subject. The only thing that exists to suggest that this is not good for the kids are the Republicans screeching about the degeneracy of trans people. Parents could lose custody of their children and face felony prosecution for seeking life-saving care, and providers will be criminalized for offering best practice medicine. Yeah, trans gender-affirming medical care is oftentimes life-saving. I know people who are at all proximal to, like, super edgy spaces on the internet have heard at least once or twice the sort of joke about the suicide rate in the trans community. Guess what, motherfucker? That number goes substantially down if trans people have access to medical care to affirm their gender. Any support structures make the suicide rate sharply decline. So, what are Republicans doing? They're stripping away every element that they can get at of that support structure. So in 1 week, not even, we have a bill introduced to ban the Democratic Party, a bill introduced to require bloggers to register with the state if they are writing anything politically relevant. We have a bill introduced that would ban gender-affirming care for youth and adults in somewhat uncertain terms, and a bill that would ban such care in very certain terms, as well as legalizing the kidnapping of children from parents that are supportive. Now, I think it's relevant to mention as well, Florida has a Republican supermajority in both chambers of its state legislature. And if Republicans are as insane as I think they are, these are going to pass. And even if not all of them, at least one or two of these bills is going to pass. They're going to reach DeSantis' desk. You better fucking believe he's going to sign them into law. However long these bills get deliberated for, in the next couple of weeks, Florida could go from a backsliding to democracy to a almost completely fascistic dictatorship. I think I remember a month or so ago, I talked about the insane anti-trans bills that were proposed in Tennessee, Texas, Arizona, Arkansas, and Missouri. One of those bills has since passed. At least one of them. I think maybe 2 or 3 of them have passed, if not all of them. I remember seeing about Tennessee. They had passed the bill that I was talking about. That's now law. And that's only in the span of a month. The clock is ticking, folks. We're now, I think, comfortably in at least the beginning stages of a trans genocide in the United States, conducted by the Republican Party. Whether or not they'll be able to finish the genocide in the way that they want to, that's up to us now. We have to, although it sounds cheesy and ineffectual to say vote blue no matter who, what we really need to do is advocate for progressive policy making that would, you know, consider all of the relevant medical data that we have on the subject, get the most progressive possible candidates on the ballot for public office, and then vote blue no matter who. Because otherwise what's going to happen is we're going to keep getting these neoliberal, you know, tough on crime centrists who still believe in playing patty cake with Republicans, and the tide of fascism is going to simply wash into the United States unopposed. Neoliberals are almost completely feckless in their dealing with fascism as an actual threat. The only other saving grace that I see here is that anti-trans policymaking is very unpopular in the United States. The majority of Americans are supportive of trans rights and, you know, do not take well to the anti-trans rhetoric that Republicans have been engaging in. In fact, that's partly what's responsible for them underperforming in the last cycle of elections in 2022. So running on a progressive platform, that stuff works. And running on an anti-trans platform, that stuff makes you lose. But you know what else makes you lose? The status quo. So, progressives, get out there. And anybody who's on the fence, if you support trans rights, even in concept, then it is your moral duty to oppose the Republican Party on these issues. I cannot repeat that enough times. So, you know, on the progressive left, we have workers' rights, reparations for black community, and trans rights. Meanwhile, on the right, you have tax cuts for, you know, the wealthiest people in the country, in the world even, and queer genocide. That's what you got. Let's go to the United Nations definition of genocide. Definition of genocide. Article 2 of the Convention defines genocide as any of the following acts committed with intent to destroy, in whole or in part, a national, ethnic, racial, or religious group as such. Or other group. I should add that, because sexual minorities still count in this aspect. A. Killing members of the group. B. Causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group. C. Deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction, in whole or in part. D. Imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group. E. Forcibly transferring children of the group to another group. So, what the Republicans are doing across the United States, and especially in this case in Florida, fits indirectly the first part, killing members of the group, removing the access to trans medical care, will drive up the suicide rates of trans people, ensuring that more of them die than would otherwise. It definitely fits B, causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group, not having the affirming medical care that you need, and being stuck with a host of social associations that you really do not want to be attached to you, you know, forced down a line of expression that you don't agree with, can take a serious mental toll. This is why trans people suffer from disproportionate rates of mental illness when people are constantly deriding them for what they are. Deliberately inflicting on the group calculations of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction, in whole or in part. That one definitely fits as well. The phrasing isn't as specific, but certainly Republicans have made it a point to make public life as hard for trans people as is possible. You know, by restricting access to care, criminalizing the expression of gender that differs from the sex you were assigned at birth. Let's see. D. Imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group. Ironically, this is the one condition that I don't think is specifically met. However, with this new bill that was introduced in Florida, Part E is unambiguously met. Forcibly transferring children of the group to another group. The bill, keep in mind, would legalize the practice of the state confiscating children from their families should their families be supportive of giving them gender-affirming care. And, you know, again, I hate to draw parallels to Nazi Germany, where it is 100% appropriate to do so. But the removal of knowledge pertaining to a group is also a condition that usually leads up to a genocide. And in Nazi Germany, the most infamous picture of a book burning was actually a burning of books from the Sexual Research Institute, or the Sexual Research Center in Germany, and they were burning literature on queer people and transgender people. And this is much the same thing that they are doing in the United States with the book bans in schools.